Lakiesha.
Hi.
Very excited to have you here today.
I'm very excited to be interviewed today.
Yes. Well, we have a few questions that we want to ask you because we're very interested in who you are and why you're here. So, the very first question we're going to throw out to you is tell us a little bit about how you ended up in social work. Like, what
Okay.
brought you here?
Okay. Well, my story's a little different. I pretty much started in social work just with the desire to adopt. At an early age, I remember as a child just sitting in my room with dolls, and I always had the desire to have my own biological children, but also adopt other children. So I remember playing with dolls and just sitting in the room and pretending like I was going through a process of adoption. Even though I was so young, I didn't really know what that consisted of, but I knew that adoption was where you take in a child that's not biologically yours, and now they are. And so I just always had that desire. Also at a younger age, I remember kind of advocating for kids like in my class that no one really would want to play with, or they were just being picked on. And I felt like a very strong urge where I felt extremely frustrated with other people to take on this person and say, like, why are you acting like that? So at a young age, it was just a desire to kind of advocate for other people that were not accepted into what we would think is like normal in our society. And then after I grew up and went to school, I fell into the field of behavioral health, which I know you're very familiar with, and just fell in love with the kids that I worked with. That's when I really found the desire to start working with older children and advocating for them, letting them know about different careers, working on self-help skills. And then slowly after that, then we adopted our own children. And I just really saw the experience that, we went through and got into social work. And that's when I started going to home visits and just learning more about there's such a need for especially the older ones in foster care. And that's where my passion just really developed.
It's very interesting to see how your life kind of brought you this way from the get-go.
Yeah.
Tell us, how did your experience in adoption, how has that helped you in the aspect of social work? Like, how do you feel they merged together and it's of course made you a better social worker, but how do you think that has helped?
It's definitely helped. I would say that it's helped in a way where I can understand the ups and the downs, because I'm human. So I do understand the ups and downs of, fostering. And I know we'll get into this a little bit more with my husband as well, but I understand the heartbreak of, children that are reunited with biological parents. I understand that one day, everything will be great in your family. What you've been working on to teach a child, they just get it. And then the next day you're like, we just worked on this. It's starting all over. It's helped me to also understand the waiting process, to understand that, you're going through all this paperwork, you're getting all the requirements, you're now approved, yay, congratulations. And then now we wait. Now we wait for a long time for our placement. And I've also understood the excitement that a lot of these families go to finally hearing the words like, congratulations, these children are now a Hall, right? They now have your official last name. So it's definitely helped me to just understand that these kids, they're not always going to be like this perfect little child that, you know, people might imagine them to be. They are individuals. They're going to go through the ups and downs, and you need to learn how to cope through that process. So as a social worker, I definitely understood that. And then it's also good for me to understand what the resource parents might be feeling, that it's okay, you know, I get it right now. You feel like you're gonna give up. Tomorrow will be a whole different day, and we'll work through it together. So,
Well, thank you so much
You're
for sharing your experience. I think, I think it's important for people to know your story and what makes you different and why you are able to connect with these families in such a different way and in such a deeper level. So another question that we have that I think many of us would want to know is, you have a lot of experience working with younger teens. And I know one of the biggest fears out there is, how do I even think about working with teens? Or you hear all of the negativity around teenagers.
yes.
So tell us your experience with working with teens, and has your perspective changed when it comes to foster youth?
Definitely. To be honest, when I first started out, even in behavioral health and health in general, I worked for a school district, and I worked with younger kids. Then I was transferred over to a high school, and that scared me to death. I was so nervous going into my job every day. It just didn't know how to interact, because at that time, like, a lot of the teenagers there thought I was a teenager too, so I just didn't know how to connect with them. And then when I started working in the field of ABA, that's when my eyes were a little bit more open to just working with the older kids. And then when I got into foster care, I think at that time I was a little bit more open to working with them, working with teenagers, just getting to know them a little bit more. And I definitely learned that when you first meet a lot of the teenagers, they could be extremely cold. You get a high, you may not get eye contact. It's a lot of prompting to come sit with me. Let's review, certain documents together. Even if you ask them, do you have any questions? It's pretty straightforward. It's like, no, I'm fine. But throughout that process, I started breaking down their wall. I've learned that sometimes you have to connect with them on a different level, like food, the necessity, right? I found myself in many situations just on visits where, I knew like Carl's Jr. was a favorite, or they would play like certain games on their phone. I think it was like Pokemon or something, and they had to go find this new character, and this character was like at a park, and I'm like, oh, I can take you. And you kind of look like, they give you this look like, really? My social worker is gonna take me to the park around the corner to find a Pokemon character? And I'm like, yeah. So I just found a way to connect with these kids. And then you really find that, like, yeah, a lot of people do stereotype these teenagers in foster care as, oh, they're bad. I don't want to deal with them. They already have a history. You can't break them from those bad habits. And I get that. I totally can relate to some of those things, because before I became a social worker, I also realized that I had those stigmas as well. And at that time of adoption, I I couldn't see myself adopting a teenager then, but working with teenagers, and once you break down those walls, break down those barriers, you just realize like these kids are hurting. These kids have been abandoned on multiple occasions, abandoned by their bio family, abandoned by, unfortunately, resource families, abandoned by the system in general. And so they don't know who to trust. You know, they're getting resource parents that are in and out of their life. They're getting county social workers that are constantly changing cases, you know, not on purpose, just because that's the process, right? So they don't know who to connect with. And even if they have made that connection with somebody, they are now possibly hurting from now that loss is taken away. And so it's definitely taught me through this process that, you know, these kids, they just need an opportunity. They need somebody to fully believe in them, to give them an opportunity to say, hey, you know, I get it. You know, I know you've been through this. I'm gonna support you no matter what. And like we did talk about before, some days might be great and you're making that connection and you're like, oh, yes, I finally broke through to this child. And then the next week you might go out there and I realize like it's from starting from scratch because something happened from that Thursday to the next week, right? That affected this child where they can't communicate with you or they're having a hard time telling you what they're going through. So I've learned to just be consistent in the child's life, knowing that you're there, even if it's a simple text like, hey, have a good day, or hey, I know you have that test today, you know, make sure you know, have a coffee or something before, like just something that you know that they like, that you're just making sure that you're present in their life. That's something that I've definitely learned, and just different ways that I've learned to kind of break down that stereotype that I know we get a lot. Yeah.
And I think it's important to hear that because, you know, there is a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And two, I think there's a lot of insecurity in us as adults sometimes. Yes. Of, are we going to be good enough, or are they going to love us?
Yeah.
And again, we've talked so much about, we have to remember that this process is not about us.
Yeah.
This process is about them and their healing, and getting them through whatever the circumstance is. So we appreciate your experience and expertise in this. As we prepare to close this interview, and we're going to be seeing you later on. Yeah. But one of the questions that I would like to close this off is, what has been an experience that you've had, or a story with one of the clients that you've worked with, although I know confidentiality, so we might not hear a name, or but something that has stood out to you in this process of social work that you carry with you and you say, these are one of the reasons, or this is one of the reasons why I am still here today. Yeah.
And I will try to say this without tearing up, so I think I could be good. Okay. One particular story that comes to mind is to be respectful and maintain confidentiality. Basically, being told that I am maybe analyzing a situation a little differently, but in my heart, fully feeling like something's not right, and advocating to the point where I feel like, okay, I am advocating so much that what am I gonna do, Lord, right? Like, I'm advocating where I feel like I can't advocate anymore. I'm hitting barriers, and pretty much putting everything into a particular case where I feel like I'm not really getting anything out of it in the end. But then for the case to completely turn around when it was unexpected and to see that this child just completely changed just based on a different environment, which I always felt like would have been a better situation, right? So to pretty much advocate for someone that you know might be better for them and feeling it wholeheartedly in your spirit that this is what this child needs, even when this child doesn't know what this child needs. So that has been a huge blessing for me, just to know that, wow, Lord, you used me in this situation. You've given me insight when I thought that I couldn't fight anymore for this particular child. And just knowing that, okay, this was one. I know you have more for me, right? So that's been the biggest blessing for me, just to know that, you know, you are now carrying these children's voices that do not feel like they have a voice, and you're empowering them to eventually use that voice on their own, to know that there are better places for me. There are better situations. Like, my life is not always going to be bad. Like, I deserve better. And then for them to actually realizing their potential and just seeing them like flourish like that, that has been the best experience so far for me. Yeah.
And to close it off, I know I said that was the last question, but as I heard you saying your story, and I know we have to be very careful because there's so much we can't share.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, you fought so hard for a lot of children, really, because I worked with you for a long time. So you've shown me a way of not giving up when I feel like there's more that can be done for a child. And whether that's connecting more with a county worker, trying to find better resources, sitting down with the family, you break barriers because you know that this is not the only thing that can happen. There's better for this child.
Yeah.
So for any social workers that might hear you in the future, what is your advice? How would you advise them to fight the way you have fought for children in the past?
Wow. I would say just to be present. And even if, say, you know, you move on from a case, your number may not change, right? So to always let that child know, hey, I may not be on your case anymore, but if you ever need resources, I'm still here. I think that is the biggest way to fight for them, because again, they may feel like they've just lost another connection, may feel like it's not okay to still reach out to you. So I think that's the biggest thing, because they may not be ready, right? When you feel like you are at that time in your life, like you're like, I'm ready, why are they not ready, right? They might not be ready. It might take for them to age out of foster care or graduate. And later on, they might still have your number. And that may be the time where they're like, hey, you know what? I still have that one social worker's number. Let me see if he or she will answer their phone. And if you answer your phone, that just shows you planted the seed that that child can always come back to you. And so that to me is, it is frustrating when you feel like you planted that seed and nothing's sprouting from that seed. I've been there, and you just want to almost look this child in the eye and say, why are you not doing this? Like, I know what's best for you, you know, I've been there. But believe me, that seed, you're planting that seed for a reason. So just making sure you're available, because it might be a year from now that child might come back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Lakiesha,
No
for these
problem.
interviews. We appreciate you and all the work that you do. And I know we'll hear from you later in a different type of a setting. So
Yes.
we look forward to that. But thank you to everyone who's viewing and has been
Thank
listening.
you.
Have a blessed day.
Bye.